Welcome everyone to House of the Commons. You probably got here before me. This next sort of hour and a half before lunch is a session, Gentrification, Resistance and Building Renters' Power. So hopefully that's what people think they're here for. So welcome. My name's Christine. I'm a private tenant. I live in South London at the moment, and I've been involved in various housing groups and campaigns around there. And so I'm going to be facilitating this next session. So it sounds like the first section this morning was really informative, interesting, but maybe a bit depressing about the state of the housing system at the moment. So our job for the next hour and a half is hopefully to take you from a state of despair into hopefully a state of being ready for action to make things a bit better. And so it's really exciting that I'm joined by 5 amazing, inspiring housing campaigners who are from the far end, Jacob Wills from Radical Housing Network, Beth Stratford from the Renters' Power Project. Is that your hat you're wearing at the moment? Anabela Bennet from Rentstrike, Aysen Dennis from the Fight for the Aylesbury Campaign, and last but not least, Anabela Hardwick from Save Earl's Court Supporters Club. So basically, I'm going to shut up now and let them basically give you a little taster of their campaigns and their groups, some of the lessons they've learned from the stuff they've been involved in, and some of the successes that they've had so far. So this is just a little taster. They're going to speak for about 5 minutes each, and then we're going to have a proper break for people to stretch their legs, get some fresh air, have a cup of tea. There might even be cake. There's cake, great. And then if you come back for about 12:15, then we're going to have some more focused discussions, and I'll explain just before we break how they're going to work. So hopefully that sounds okay to everyone. So I'm basically going to hand over now to Beth to start us off, just explaining a little bit about the Renters' Power Project.
Okay, so the Renters' Power Project... Oh, do I need this as well? Sorry. The Renters' Power Project is a project that's come out of discussions between a whole bunch of housing groups and housing activists, including Generation Rent, which many of you would have heard of, Acorn, which has been mobilising largely in Bristol, but now in other cities across the country mobilising. They're actually a community union. They describe themselves as mobilising people within a community to fight on whatever they want to, but in practice it's been largely tenants' rights issues. Take Back the City, which is a group in London that mobilised to put up a candidate for election in the London Assembly, and has been using kind of quite interesting and unusual they've basically been talking to as many marginalised groups as they can, diverse groups across the city, to sort of crowdsource a manifesto for that, so that it's really informed by the experiences of ordinary Londoners and people whose voices are often not heard. Groups from the Radical Housing Network as well, including Hackney Digs, which Jacob's very involved with. So all of us have kind of come together to basically discuss and explore what a renters' union might look like. So we've got this huge constituency of people who are really being screwed over by the housing market, growing in number, have fewer rights than renters across Europe, and higher rents than renters in almost all cities across Europe, and could form the basis of a movement for changing things within the housing system. What we want to make sure is that any renters, you'll probably have heard the idea of setting up a renters union being bandied around quite a lot nowadays. Numerous organisations and bodies are starting to recognise that we need some kind of union to support renters and to make sure their voices are heard. I guess what we wanted to make sure was that anything that's set up is actually informed by the experiences of a really diverse range of renters themselves, including not just the sort of most visible and privileged among renters, but all groups and all demographics among renters. We also wanted to make sure it was informed by the experience of existing housing activists and mobilisers, what's worked, what's not worked, in terms of, scaling up the housing movement. So what we're hoping to do is kind of set up a process, a series of sort of bring together housing activists and community mobilisers to kind of go through a series of deliberative workshops where we try and sort of explore and build consensus around key questions like what demands should we be coalescing around? What new forms of action can bring renters more power within the system? And if we set up a new renters union, what will it look like? How will it be structured? How will accountability be maintained? How will we make sure it's representative and inclusive? So we're wanting to sort of bring together both existing activists for that and do sort of trust building and knowledge sharing and experience sharing. But we also want to do lots and lots of listening sessions with renters themselves. Have I managed to summarise that accurately, you think, Jacob? So that's the process that we're right. Sorry, and we'd be really interested to talk to you more about that process and even start discussing some of those questions. Sorry.
Cool. That's perfect. You're dead on time. Great. Brilliant. So we're going to hear next from Aysen from Fight for the Aylesbury Campaign.
Okay, I'm Aysen Dennis, and I came with a great news. If you don't know, the Aylesbury Estate, we won the CPO order, which has been blocked by the Secretary of State, which is so, the funny, the Tory government is blocking the Labour Council decision, that's another discussion to, what the Labour is going, that's the other things. But I mean, we started 16 years ago, the Aylesbury campaign. So in 2001, we had a ballot, and we won the ballot. It's 73% of tenants and leaseholders voted to stay with council and stated no privatization in our area. And of course, because those, the greedy people, they didn't accept the democratically voted ballot, but they came back again, What happened is, because of our oppositions and because of our working within the community, passing all the information, whatever we gather from them, because everything they do behind the closed doors, and you can't get enough proper information what is happening. So we endlessly trying to get those information and pass on to our community. In a way, to empowering our community to make their own decision accordingly the information is being given to them. So we've been constantly campaigning, but the last year, when the occupation took place in Aylesbury Estate, which I salute those people, it takes our campaign in a different level. What we wanted to show there, is the first housing crisis, created housing crisis, not because we have crisis. And also the squatting, because, the laws keep changing and they are putting squatters in a difficult position. So we wanted to highlight these two issues. And our occupation, I don't know how many of you heard about it, but very successful. And we managed to stay 2 months in 3 different blocks in the empty area in Aylesbury Estate. And then eventually, by the court, we get evicted from there. But where we occupied is been already emptied. 600 unit flats has been emptied since 2010 by the council. Decanted, the displaced people in order to get this developer, to make nice home for the hipster, yuppie, not for us. But despite everything is going on, the council, without any shame, they keep putting on their leaflets saying that this is for your community, what we do is for you. So we have to everywhere name and shame, especially the Labour-led councils, because they are leading in the social cleansing. So what happened is, Aylesbury Estate is 2,740 flats, which is the biggest council estate in Europe. Symbolically, it's very, very important what is happening in Aylesbury Estate. So it's been, 600 units has been emptied, and what is happening, the council stated 50 million will be, the decanting, the taking out, displaced tenants. But it is becoming 150 million for council to, in 10 years period, to displace people and decant the area. So we are still demanding refurbishment the estate because they never checked the option as a refurbishment. So we are still fighting for the refurbishment of our estate and turned our estate in a 21st century estate and leave us alone to get along our lives.
Brilliant. Thank you, Aysen. Okay, so straight on to Anabela now from Save Earl's Court Supporters Club.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank the House of the Commons for inviting us. A bit closer. Is that better? Yep. Thanks. I'd like to thank the House of the Commons for inviting us all here today. I'd like to ask a question of the audience. Have any of you ever heard of the Earl's Court Exhibition Centre? Oh, good. That's smashing. Has anybody visited the Earl's Court Exhibition Centre for an event? Are you aware that it has been demolished? Not so many. Great. Well, basically, I've lived in Earl's Court for over half my adult life. I was living a road away from the exhibition centre. The exhibition centre brought in over £1 billion a year to our local and national economy. It represented 30% of London's and 16% of our national exhibition space. And obviously it's an iconic building, lots of different events there, exhibitions, music, art, fashion, an iconic building, globally known. Next to it is the Lily Bridge Depot. This is a centre of manufacturing excellence. It employs 500 people. We have some amazing scientists there using nanotechnology regarding the safety of the London tube network. You also have carpenters that work there, that go throughout the tube network, repairing hoardings, etc. A variety of different people work on that depot, and they also manufacture the tracks. So there's a lot going on. And it's a hidden depot, if you like, because it works at night and people aren't aware really what happens there. Next to that is 22 acres of decent social housing on the West Kensington and Gibbs Green estates. Some people have bought their own homes, there's private tenants, obviously social housing. They are decent homes, there's nothing wrong with the estates, they're not sink estates. They're in a prime area, obviously, in the middle of Hammersmith and Fulham on the border of Kensington and Chelsea. So basically, a developer called Capital and Counties Properties PLC, or CAPCO, put forward the Earl's Court Master Plan, which basically involves demolishing the whole lot and building super luxury apartments and houses. So they want to demolish 760 homes, the depot, and they have succeeded in demolishing most of the Earl's Court Exhibition Centre 1 and 2, so that's the modern and the famous one. Basically, it's been an absolute disgrace what's gone on there. It's a prime example not just of gentrification, but actually destroying buildings and communities. It's worse than gentrification. It's literally destroying an area and then appropriating its name to create what Capco says is a new area for London, Earl's Court, but without the apostrophe. And, you know, it's an absolute outrage, and unfortunately, both councils, they were both Tory councils in both the boroughs, Hammersmith and Fulham and Kensington Chelsea, approved this, and now, in the last couple of years, Labour took over, and we now have a Labour mayor, but things are in a form of stalemate, basically. As local residents, we endured terrible dust, noise, vibration. We've never seen the asbestos risk survey. It's a very old building, full of asbestos. The estate residents have been fighting since 2009. They've gone through judicial reviews. They've now got the People's Plan. They've been working with the Architects for Social Housing, ASH. I think ASH should change their name to Architects for Social Justice because they're an incredible bunch of people. They've worked with the estate residents to create their own version of gentrification, if you like, of their estates so that it can be self-funded. They want to basically, via stock transfer, have community control of their estates. The Lea Bridge Depot is under threat of job losses, although TfL are now talking to the trade unions there. It's been an extraordinary exercise to live in an area where, from Boris Johnson, Eric Pickles, down to the local councils, they are completely ignoring the wishes of the majority of the people that live on the estates. And post-Brexit, they have succeeded in destroying something which really would have helped our economy. When Germany, after the Second World War, started building up their economy, they relied extensively on exhibition centres, and they still do. So it's an absolute disgrace, and around our area it's almost like there's a silence within the press, very difficult to get our story out, a silence from local councils. It's been really quite shocking what's gone on, and is still going on in this particular area. And our small group, we focused on fundraising through music and arts and trying to get the message out. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to point out that the Radical Housing Network are an amazing bunch of people, and they support different groups, large and small, and they're just amazing. So thank you very much.
Cool, brilliant, thank you. We're going to hear from Jacob in a minute from Radical Housing Network, but first, as we pass the microphone along the line, I'm going to pass to Anabela from Rentstrike, who's got some exciting stuff to tell you about.
Hi. So I was involved in the UCL Cut the Rent campaign last year. I don't know if you heard about it, but we managed to launch a 5-month-long rent strike this past academic year, which resulted in us getting over £1 million in rent subsidies from the university in the form of bursaries, rent freezes, compensation. How did we do this? Well, the campaign started about a year and a half ago, and basically, we did our research to find out some stats, because we saw, those of us who'd been in the university a few years saw, how the rent was going up, so we were like, oh, what's going on here? So it turned out that the rent in UCL accommodation had increased 56% since 2009 to 2010 to the past academic year. This year it would have increased even more. And in the last academic year, UCL was set to make £16 million profit from their accommodation. Now, the university is a public institution, it's a charitable organisation. It has a duty of care to its first-year students to guarantee accommodation, but it's making this ludicrous profit off of them by increasing the rents. They own the properties, yet they are still striving to make it, comparable to the private sector. So we decided to do something about this. So the idea for a rent strike was bandied about. We spoke to people. When we told them all these stats, people were, obviously outraged, and we gathered a lot of support in quite a short space of time. And then in January, mostly focused in one hall that had, was one of the cheaper halls, but had problems for like at least 8 years of cockroach infestations, hot water cutting out, like the hobs not working, sharing bathrooms to like 14 people. This is like not a pleasant place to live. In the end, half of the residents of that hall went on strike. So when the invoice came in, when rent was due, they just didn't pay. That was it. And all of a sudden we had a rent strike with 150 people. And the campaign grew and grew and grew. The university management finally decided to pay attention to us, because before, we'd sent petitions and this kind of thing, but obviously they could ignore us, so they did. And then once they couldn't ignore us, they're like, okay, we'll meet you. And then fast forward, and we also did, a bunch of actions, like direct action as well, that brought attention to our campaign and also for solidarity with the strikers. And then fast forward to May, the strike grew. Almost 1,000 students were on strike by that point. Bearing in mind, these are first-year students. These are like 18, 19-year-olds. And, a rent strike does present quite a risk, especially to international students, to working-class students, because come, eviction threats, there are students who are vulnerable to that, who could lose their visa, who could become homeless. And so, luckily, the university did not carry through with its eviction threats because it's a very prestigious institution. And if they were evicting 1,000 of their students or hundreds of students, like a whole halls of residents, that reflects very badly on the university, because while they are a scumbag landlords, like everyone, like all the others, they also have this reputation to uphold, which I feel is probably why the rent strike was as successful as it was. So in the end, we won all this compensation, and since there have been cut the rent groups starting all over the country, I think now we've got about 15 or so groups starting up. So we've got like Aberdeen, Cardiff, all over London, Sussex, whatever. And last month we hosted a conference called the Rentstrike Weekender down in London. We had 25 campuses represented there, 160 students and activists came for a weekend of workshops, discussion, making friends. And so the next year looks very, very promising. So I'm from Rentstrike, which is basically joining up the cut the rent campaigns all over the country, providing resources, getting people to talk to each other, opening up those lines of communications. So there's solidarity between different groups, and also potentially support for eviction resistance, should that be necessary. And so, the next year looks very promising, and hopefully we'll have rent strikes nationwide. That's it.
Amazing. Brilliant, thank you, so inspiring. So just before we wrap up for the break, we're just going to hear quickly from Jacob from Radical Housing Network, and then I'm just going to explain how the breakouts are going to work.
Hi, I'm Jacob from Radical Housing Network. I'm not doing a pitch for a small group, I'm just sort of slightly summarising some of the different struggles, as we seem to do in Radical Housing Network quite a lot. We're a network of almost 30 mostly local groups, borough-specific, but cross-tenure across London. So we've got squatters collectives, private renters groups such as my own in Hackney, people who live on the waterways, etc. And so organising such a network gives you quite a broad view of a lot of the forms of housing organising going on, which is what I was asked to talk about briefly. And I thought about when I was here a year ago, and we had, I think we'd just come out of a wave of, Aylesbury occupation, we'd had Sweetsway, stuff was really kicking off in West Hendon. A lot of council estates were really mobilised, and there was a lot of housing action going on. And I was thinking on the way down, oh God, what am I going to talk about? That it's great to be here with people who are winning stuff, which I wasn't doing last year, and I realised that's what
It was 2 years ago.
Oh, it's 2 years ago. Okay. Yeah. So in a sense, the housing movement has been. 2 years ago, we were a bit worried doing too much reaching out to other organisers, when we were thinking about what does Radical Housing Network look like, for example, because we weren't consolidated as a movement in any sense. We were finding our feet as a housing movement, despite the fact that, campaigners such as Aysen and many others have been, in this for the long haul. And now, actually, there's so much more of a sense of that movement, both from us and from our enemies, that I think a lot of forms of action and organisations are crystallising. And we're in a slightly reflective mode, at least the organisations I'm involved in. The Renters' Power Project, which is thinking, right, we've been doing private renting organising on a localised level like this, but our demands are national in scale, so we need to scale up. How can we do that using the experiences that we've developed, etc.? Or, a new coalition coming together around the closure of the Holloway prison site and the future of the women who are living there, and in fact, Pentonville Prison and Brixton in London are soon to follow as well, where we're bringing together a really sort of febrile intersection of housing organisers, feminist organisers, anti-racist organisers, prison abolition, and now we know we're housing organisers, but we know we need to push beyond our boundaries, and that's a really exciting place to be in, and it looks to me like, in fact, a lot of groups are really taking that on. I mean, if we look at, for example, the Sisters Uncut occupation in East London, they're a feminist organisation fighting the cuts to domestic violence services, but they see themselves as a housing organisation who are fighting for, more places for women to be able to go to if they're fleeing domestic violence, for example. So, to me, that's a really interesting and strong development, and gives us a basis for shifting the composition of the housing movement to create a truly mass movement, whether we're talking within the private rented sector or just shifting public opinion enough of many homeowners, etc., as well, to be able to support a shift in some of these policies. I think it's great as well to see that there are a lot of different organisational forms at play. We've had a lot of occupations which are shock tactic, hard hitting, but we've also had quite a lot of groups doing really well at negotiating with power holders, like for example, Cut the Rent, getting £1 million, or the Sisters occupation in East London. Negotiating with power holders on a localised level, I think, can be really, really powerful, especially when you spend the time on building your base. But on a national level, we haven't felt for quite a while like we're in a scenario where we can make any significant gains there. But one thing I would say is that I think historically, if you look back, generally people think, you're going to stop stuff in the first year of a new government when everyone's really fucked off with them, and you've got a lot of energy and anger. And when that didn't happen with us in the student movement, etc., I think a lot of people felt like, oh God, okay, we're in it for the long haul now. But in fact, a lot of the time, the wins come a year before the end of the tenure of the government, not at the very beginning. And I think now we've got enough time to reflect on a lot of the lessons that we've been learning. And I'm speaking particularly about, for example, the Renters' Power Project at the moment, so something I'm thinking about a lot. We've got enough time to work out what we want organisation to look like, through a really wide-ranging process that involves people, and then start something in 2017, 2018, build up enough power by 2019, that in fact, we're going to win stuff. That's the great thing. Wins are already happening on a localised level, but the private rented sector is going to change. There's no way, I'm not a total negativist, if everything gets really shit, then eventually, people will, revolt. But the sector is growing and growing. As more and more people push into a sector that's more and more expensive, and as the sector grows, the relative power of private renters nationally also grows. So what we need to be doing is putting in place the organisations that can take advantage of that, strengthening power. I think we're doing all right at that at the moment. It's going to take quite a lot of reflection and sort of knotty meetings. But I think we're doing all right at that, and concessions are going to be made, and the thing is we just have to be organised enough to claim those wins when they come, so that people feel like actually collectivising around your housing or your community gets the goods. And a lot of people sense that, but they haven't experienced it. We need to help people experience it on a localised level, and then we need to demonstrate how it's possible to make those wins on a national level. And I really think it is. I'm really happy to be here, that these spaces are being created where we can share a lot of. So I'm falling into the dross of. But I really do feel it, and so I'm excited for our breakouts as well. Do stick around, come to our. Sorry,
Cool, brilliant. Thank you to all our wonderful panellists. And I'm sorry to you guys that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but basically we just wanted to give you a taster of some of the kind of different forms of resistance to some of the attacks on people's homes and communities that are already happening, and maybe a bit of a sense of how they might be kind of escalated and scaled up to take on some of the challenges that were discussed earlier this morning.